June 24th, 1988. At the Domburg Medical Center in England, a staff member placed a call to a practicing lawyer named Angela. The message was devastating. Her mother had been found dead in her own home. The news hit Angela hard. She traveled from city to city to arrange and attend the funeral service. And once the mourning ended, she was hit with an entirely different kind of shock. Her mother's will. She discovered, to her horror, that her mother had cut her and her own grandchildren out of the inheritance entirely. Instead, her mother had left everything, an estate valued at over 380,000 British pounds, to her personal physician, Dr. Shipman. And in that same document, she had insisted that she did not want a burial. She wanted her body cremated and her ashes scattered across sunflower fields. The will was bizarre enough that Angela immediately suspected something fraudulent was behind it. She requested a formal investigation and demanded a forensic examination of her mother's body before any cremation could proceed. She also requested that her father's body be exhumed because when she connected the two wills together, she realized something too disturbing to ignore. The examination went forward. Her father's remains were exhumed and analyzed as well. Both death certificates had been signed by the same physician, Dr. Harold Shipman, one of the most respected doctors in London at the time. A specialist in cancer treatment, credited with pioneering psychological support programs for cancer patients across all of Britain. The bodies were examined, and what investigators uncovered was a secret buried since 1977, 23 years before her mother's death. The shocking discovery? Her mother and father had not died naturally. They had been murdered. And they weren't alone. Over 250 people had died the exact same way, at the hands of a single man, driven by 5 deeply held personal beliefs that allowed him to kill without a trace of mercy. This man would become the most prolific serial killer in British history. And it all began when he was 17, after watching his mother die in front of him over 4 agonizing years. From that moment, he vowed he would become the cause of the total extinction of the human race. And if he couldn't achieve that, he would kill as many people as he possibly could. If this is your first time here, I'm Amin, the narrator. I cover everything strange and mysterious on this planet. And as always, before we begin, don't let this video, even if you're enjoying it, make you forget the value of a subscribe and a like. Today, I'm telling you the story of the most dangerous serial killer in British history. You might picture a monster, someone who looks like a criminal. But this particular killer earned the nickname the Quiet Killer, or the Angel of Death, because he drew the life out of his victims so calmly, so quietly, that no one ever felt it happening. This criminal's real story only truly began the moment he was arrested, not before he was exposed. Our story today is about Dr. Harold Shipman. November 14th, 1946, in the city of Nottingham, in Nottinghamshire, England, Harold Frederick Shipman was born, the middle child of 3. His father worked as a truck driver, his mother worked in a grocery shop. He had an ordinary childhood. At 15, he joined an American-style rugby club. He became an exceptional player, competed in numerous tournaments, and won multiple awards. Harold was calm, controlled, disciplined in every part of his life. No one ever raised a single concern about him. He could juggle everything at once: academics, sports, social relationships, and excel at all of it simultaneously. He was genuinely gifted at whatever he applied himself to. One day, on a whim, he decided to switch from rugby to track and field. Within just 2 months of training, he competed in a championship and won silver. Within 6 months, he had competed in multiple tournaments and collected several medals. Add to that his consistent academic excellence, he knew precisely what he was doing and had already decided from a very young age exactly what he wanted to become. But at 15, he experienced something that affected him deeply, though he managed for a time to push past it. His father disappeared with no explanation. It was the first real trauma of his life. His father simply abandoned them, left, and started a new life in a different city. Harold managed to move past it until he discovered his mother had cancer, and that his father's abandonment had actually been driven, at least in part, by her illness. His mother had already been sick for 3 years before his father disappeared, though she never told the children until after he left.
For Harold, this was excruciating, because he had always been deeply attached to his mother. A profound darkness began forming inside him, directed at his father. Honestly, the man was simply worthless. His wife got sick and he walked away. Not a decent human being. As his mother entered the final stages of her illness, resentment kept building in Harold's heart, a darkness unlike anything else. He stayed in that state until the day she died in front of him, August 21st, 1963. He was 17 years old, and he watched his mother in a state of suffering no human being should ever witness. In that moment, he made himself a vow. He would become the cause of humanity's extinction, or at the very least, kill as many human beings as he possibly could. Because in his mind, a society like this one didn't deserve to continue existing on this planet. Harold pushed through the pain with difficulty, continued his education, and entered medical school at the University of Leeds. Before graduating, specifically in 1966, just 3 years after his mother's death, he married. He was only 20 years old. The decision made no logical sense whatsoever, but he made it anyway, because he needed a woman in his life to fill the void his mother left behind. Sources indicate Harold was an intensely emotional person, and the double loss of his mother, and effectively his father, made this feeling even more acute. Marriage seemed to him like the best available remedy. He wrote in his diaries that after marrying, he abandoned his revenge fantasies entirely, and felt, for a time, that he was genuinely part of society, a single point in the vast entity we call the universe, with a duty to contribute good to both his community and the world. The problem, as you'll see, is that this idea completely contradicts everything that follows. Harold graduated medical school in 1970 and began working at a clinic in Pontefract. 4 years later, he had become the lead general practitioner at that same clinic. Sources indicate that throughout those years, he was genuinely happy. No apparent issues. He seemed to feel real love and belonging in the world, until the day he first tried a drug that changed him completely. One day, he experienced sharp abdominal pain along with severe intestinal spasms. Since he was a general practitioner, he naturally knew exactly how to handle this himself. He administered himself a shot of pethidine, but used a far larger dose than necessary. He felt a euphoria he had never experienced before in his life. It worked, and worked well. And Harold began writing prescriptions for himself using this substance and started reducing the pain medication doses his own patients were receiving, skimming supply for his own personal use. This left his patients suffering in agony throughout the night, constant screaming, pain, and desperate pleas for treatment. What was strange was that only Harold's patients seemed to be experiencing this consistently. Eventually, colleagues grew suspicious. One doctor confronted him directly and warned him, "If this continues, I will report you." But Harold, already fully in the grip of addiction, ignored the warning and continued. He was reported. He was arrested. But, fortunately for Harold, he was only dismissed from the clinic without losing his medical license. He entered rehabilitation for approximately 3 years. His wife and their 4 children stood by him every step of the way. He writes in his diaries, "How many times I wished for the extinction of humanity, but I never wanted my perfect family to be part of that death." He completed treatment and fully recovered from his addiction. But during that same treatment period, he made himself a private vow. Once he left the facility, he would take revenge on everyone who had ever been a cause of his mother's death. Now, you might assume this meant specific people. It didn't. He considered every human being alive on this planet a contributing cause in his loss of his mother. He left rehabilitation and began working at a medical center in Manchester, and socially, he came back better than ever. In 1983, he opened his own private practice, and over the next decade he received numerous awards, was even the subject of a documentary titled The World of Work. Publicly, Harold was a guardian angel, but quietly, in the shadows, he was executing his plan. You should know, everything I'm telling you from this point forward became known only after Harold was arrested, after his crimes were fully exposed. Now let me lay all of this out for you, piece by piece. Let's get into the belief system that drove him to kill his victims. You need to understand, Harold operated according to 5 distinct core beliefs, and based on these, he killed. His first belief, cancer, was a disease humanity shouldn't find a cure for. Quite the opposite. It should remain so that the entire planet could feel exactly what his mother had felt. This belief hardened after he conducted his own research into cancer treatment. He came to believe that people with stronger genetics deserved to live, while those with weaker genetics were better off dead. In his view, anyone who wasn't normal should die. Anyone with any flaw or condition should die. This is, essentially, the exact same logic as a certain mustached dictator's chicken. And so, publicly, he treated cancer patients, but in reality, he was watching them die slowly, right in front of him, exactly as his mother had died. The doses he gave his patients under his supervision were palliative doses, meant to let the disease continue while masking the symptoms, so the disease could take over the entire body, making survival nearly impossible. The drug Harold used most frequently was diamorphine, considered a highly effective painkiller for cancer patients. He used it specifically because this was the exact drug that had made his mother's death an inevitability. Her doctor had given her large doses of it, because the actual treatments that might have saved her life were too expensive. The physician treating her was indifferent to whether she lived or died. Harold learned this only after studying medicine, only after conducting his own cancer research. Imagine the hatred that grew inside Harold, day after day, as this realization settled in. Just as his mother had died from that palliative drug, he decided everyone would die the exact same way. And his plan succeeded. Of course, not everyone who died this way is among the 250 people confirmed as his victims, which brings us to his second belief. This belief stated that since no one had grieved his mother the way he had, everyone should be made to grieve their own mothers. He primarily targeted elderly women. During initial consultations, he would assess a patient's social standing, how connected she was to family and community. The more embedded a woman was in a loving family, the more her absence would cause family members genuine grief, the closer she came, in Harold's mind, to death. Harold was a general practitioner, meaning anyone could see him first, and he would diagnose them before referring them to a specialist if needed. So how did he kill elderly women without anyone noticing? In short, Harold selected his targets meticulously. He chose women whose medical condition wasn't entirely clear, women where the cause of death could plausibly be a stroke, a heart attack, angina, or any other sudden onset condition. At the exact moment he decided to kill her, he would administer medication that induced severe side effects, rapid heartbeat, dropping blood pressure, or violent vomiting, anything that looked like a clear, obvious medical emergency to everyone around her. And since patients in that era were assigned to doctors through their insurance provider, meaning they couldn't easily switch, these women had no choice but to keep coming back to Harold to continue their treatment. Once these symptoms appeared, he would administer a large dose of diamorphine. That dose would induce cardiac arrest, killing the patient anywhere between 1 minute and 15 minutes later. In other words, during exactly the window when Harold would arrive to check on her, he'd administer the injection and watch her die right in front of him. Or, if she happened to already be at the hospital, he would inject the substance directly into her IV line, ensuring the moment it took effect, she would die immediately. Right after the patient died, he would falsify her medical file, adding fabricated details that had never previously appeared, designed to confirm that this death was not sudden or unexplained, that the process had actually begun long before, and that death was simply the inevitable outcome. Was that all? No, of course not. Harold also owned a typewriter, identical to the kind used in official courtrooms. He used it to forge his patients' wills. Consistently, the wills he forged would state that the deceased wanted her body cremated, that she did not want an autopsy, and that she had already known, before her death, exactly what was happening to her, and that she had only a short time left to live. Harold spoke with his patients extensively. He knew intimate details of their lives, details he would then insert into these forged wills, details sometimes so specific that even the patient's own family didn't know them. This meant no one ever suspected anything. Everyone assumed the patient herself had genuinely written her own will. And because he was her physician, it was trivially easy to have a patient sign whatever document he needed her to sign at any time. Every will he produced carried a genuine patient signature, and to make the whole process appear entirely legal, he would deliver the forged documents to a lawyer telling them, "My patient left this with me before she passed, and I need to hand it over so you can process it properly, to keep everything fully legal." And indeed, the moment the woman died, the lawyer would appear and take care of the rest. No one ever suspected that Dr. Harold had any involvement whatsoever. Now, did Harold only kill elderly women? Absolutely not. He also killed young men and women under 50 using the exact same method without anyone noticing. He would falsify their medical records after their deaths, claiming they had a history of drug addiction, so that if any post-mortem toxicology screen detected traces of diamorphine in their systems, it would appear consistent with their supposed substance abuse history. And since everything appeared thoroughly documented in the medical records he had personally written, everything checked out clean. This was how he killed a large number of women. His third belief, that for humanity to go extinct, healthy children needed to be eliminated first, while children with disabilities whose survival contributed to the weakening of the human genetic pool should be left alone. This belief drove him to kill more than 60 children, all of them under 4 years old. When Harold was formally interrogated, he flatly denied killing any children. He said, "I may be a criminal, but at the end of the day I am still a human being, and it is unthinkable that I could do something like that." But investigations proved conclusively that he had indeed killed those children through indirect methods. He used palliative medications that would mask symptoms while leaving the underlying illness untreated. And since a child's body is still fragile, and the disease was allowed to continue unaddressed inside them, the child would die slowly, without ever fully understanding what was happening right in front of his eyes, exactly the way he liked it. Harold's story might be one of the strangest you'll ever hear, but everything I'm telling you is thoroughly documented. If you research this yourself, you'll discover even more disturbing details. You might ask yourself, how did all this time pass without anyone noticing? The answer? Harold operated this way for 23 years. Over that entire period, his total kill count didn't exceed 450 people, 250 of them confirmed and documented through medical evidence. The remaining 200 were never definitively proven. That means, at the absolute maximum, he was killing around 20 people a year, as a general practitioner at a major medical center, seeing over 1,000 cases every single month. 20 deaths simply dissolved into that volume, invisible, unnoticed. His fourth belief, that he had a personal role to play in bringing about humanity's extinction, and that if he killed 1,000 people, that alone would be enough, in his mind, as his contribution to the global reckoning he sought. He believed others out there were working toward the same goal, that if he successfully killed as many people as possible, others surely would too, and that the cumulative total across years would eventually be enough to wipe out humanity entirely. Harold actually tried, through various means, to get himself hired at research institutions studying microorganisms, hoping to participate in developing bacterial or viral strains capable of wiping out humanity. His thinking was, instead of killing 1 or 2 at a time, I could engineer a plague that kills thousands, maybe millions. Fortunately, he was never accepted into any such institution because his medical specialty was general practice. And this brings us to his fifth and final belief, the one that ensured his conscience never once stirred. He was convinced that if he killed a single person, his fate would be eternal damnation regardless, and if he killed 100, the outcome for him personally would be identical. Since the final consequence would never change, there was, in his mind, no reason for mercy. Everything I've just told you, Harold himself confirmed after he was finally arrested. For most of the people he killed, he explained exactly why he'd chosen them, and for many others, he named them explicitly and admitted to killing them without any coherent reason at all, killing them simply because he didn't know why not to. In 1998, a few months before he was exposed, a woman named Linda Reynolds, who worked at a funeral home, contacted the coroner responsible for the South Manchester region. She told him the mortality rate among Dr. Harold Shipman's patients was unusually high, and strangely, the overwhelming majority were elderly women, with 98% of those deceased under his care having requested cremation in their wills. "I find this incredibly unusual. I haven't seen this pattern with any other doctor," she told him. But the police didn't take the concern seriously. There was no concrete evidence pointing to Harold at the time, so the inquiry was quietly closed after just a few days. That is, until we arrive at the day I described at the very beginning of this video, the day the matter reached the mother of lawyer Angela. Her particular story turned out to be the strangest of them all. After her mother's death, this lawyer received a will through her lawyer, as usual, and its provisions were, on the surface, similar to every other will Harold had drafted. But for the very first time, there was a strange addition, naming Harold as sole beneficiary of her bank account, an account holding 386,000 British pounds. The whole situation was strange and illogical. Why would this woman disinherit her own daughter and grandchildren? There had been no prior conflict between them before her death. Why leave everything to Dr. Harold instead? And another troubling detail. Her mother had not been particularly ill before her death. She had no serious condition. Even stranger, the official death certificate listed the cause of death as simply old age. Neither the stated cause nor the contents of the will made any sense. So she launched an investigation. But before taking any further action, she remembered that Harold had also signed her father's death certificate. And the shock came quickly. Her mother and father had died the exact same way, and Harold had signed both certificates himself. This is why she demanded an examination of her mother's body before it could be cremated. The examination revealed a lethal excess dose of diamorphine, confirmed as the actual cause of death, something never mentioned anywhere in the official report. Harold had stated the death was natural, so why hide something like this? Harold's simple defense, well, he claimed the deceased's medical file listed a history of drug abuse, meaning the presence of such substances in her system was entirely expected. But police demanded the original copy of the report. Forensic examination of the document revealed the handwriting was recent. The report had been written after the death, not before. As for the will, police searched Harold's clinic and found a typewriter, one whose typeface and formatting matched exactly the format used in official court wills. Following this discovery, the investigation expanded dramatically. They went back and reviewed every death certificate Harold had ever signed and discovered that in just 2 months alone, he had signed 15 death certificates, all of them containing identical requests for cremation immediately after death. Following this, they exhumed lawyer Angela's own father as well. And here's the irony. He too had requested cremation in his own will, insisting no one touch his body. But the family had insisted on burying him instead. When they exhumed his remains, they found traces of alcohol-related substances in the tissue, something forensic science can detect precisely based on the stage of decomposition. Now, what exactly was the story of the 386,000 pounds? Why did Harold forge that particular will to claim it? In short,
Harold had been planning to leave Britain entirely and live out his life alone in the Tibet region. He'd come to believe that no matter how hard he tried, humanity would never actually go extinct, that nothing he did would meaningfully change anything. No matter how many people he killed, humanity would carry on. So he decided to emigrate, to live an austere, authentic existence, somewhere as far removed from the noise and progress of civilization as possible. And the ideal location for that was Tibet. Mountains, valleys, isolation. The money he was trying to steal was meant to be left for his own family, so they could live off it once he vanished from their lives. But his plan collapsed. He was arrested and confessed to every crime he had committed. He initially tried to deny the charges against him, but eventually admitted to everything. He spoke openly about his beliefs, his ideology, why he had killed all these people. Early in the interrogation, he told the story of his mother. He was 53 at the time, cold, expressionless. His calm unsettled every investigator in the room. But when he spoke about his mother's death, he wept, as though he had traveled back to being 17 years old again. The investigation continued for 2 years, and he was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment. This was in the year 2000. His only public statement at the time was, "At last, I am going to a place where I cannot kill anyone, except perhaps one person." Throughout his entire investigation and imprisonment, he never once reached out to his wife, despite her repeated attempts to speak with him. She refused until the very end to believe any of it. She hired multiple lawyers because she was absolutely certain that Harold could never have done something like this. Throughout his imprisonment, she wrote to him repeatedly, telling him, "I know you're innocent." But Harold never once responded, until one day, she sent him a letter that said, "I believe in you. I am certain you are innocent. I know you're telling the truth. Even if the entire world tells me you did this, I know in my heart that you didn't." That letter, finally, made Harold respond to his wife for the first time. He wrote back, "Everyone is right. I am angry with myself." He told the officer he wanted that letter sent to his wife because he was tired, dying inside, because he had betrayed his wife's trust in him. 2 weeks after that, specifically on January 13th, 2004, the day before Harold Shipman's 58th birthday, a guard entered his cell and found him dead. It was clear he had ended his own life. He had hung himself, ending his life specifically so that his wife and children could still collect his life insurance policy before he turned 60, because had he reached 60, they would have lost the payout entirely. After his death, his wife remained adamant until her final days that everything had been fabricated against him, that it was impossible for a man who had lived beside her for 35 years to be a criminal. But the strangest detail of this man's entire story is the final note he wrote before ending his own life. Beside him, a small handwritten note that read, "I miss my mother. I'm going to see her." That was today's story. I hope you found it worthwhile. If this kind of story interests you, check out this next video. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Shipman was mentally ill and that everything stemmed from his love for his mother? And do you genuinely believe that a person exposed to a trauma this severe could truly transform into something like this? I'm Amin, the narrator. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.